Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner from the Robust Opposition, and I'm here to welcome you to a very special show. This is the first candidates forum that I have hosted since I moved to North Carolina a year and 3 months ago. And I'm very pleased that it is the forum for Senate District 49 here in North Carolina. It's not my Senate district, but it is a Senate district that affects a lot of Asheville. And the incumbent is Julie Mayfield, who is driving right now and is therefore going to be joining us at first by phone until she gets home and can plugs in. And then her challengers are Sandra Kilgore, who is a local realtor and a member of the Asheville City Council, and Taylon Breedon, who is a downtown business owner and also a community activist. Welcome to my show, ladies. Okay, the format is going to be this. We are going to have 2 minutes of opening statements. Then I'm going to ask questions to the candidates about their backgrounds. Then we're going to go into the issues. And then I've offered each candidate the opportunity to ask one question of each of their opponents. And then we're going to have closing statements. And if we have time and we get questions from viewers, which viewers you can post in the chat, we will try to get to some of your questions. But this show is going live right now on Facebook on my page and also on my YouTube channel. So please feel free to share this show with others who you think may want to ask questions, but also know that it will remain on the page and the channel for you to share after watching. So without any further ado, let's get into our opening statements, and we'll start with you, Taylon Breedon.
Thank you. My name is Taylon Breedon, and I am a community activist and downtown small business owner. I have joined this race because I feel we need more working class people in our government to protect our local residents from being pushed out of our community due to unaffordable housing, low wages, and poor public school education. Our community does not trust our government. That's largely due to closed-door politics and leaders not being accountable or connected to the communities they represent. I believe that government should be about bringing us closer together, creating new avenues for us to care for each other, and to make decisions with each other. We don't need our government to save us. We really just need them to listen to us, stop selling us out, stop gerrymandering our maps, and work with us in investing our tax dollars wisely. We need policy focused on people first, not around the highest bidder. There's no negotiating that with me. That's going to take shifting power back to local government and becoming an initiative state. I am not afraid to lead the charge to change with love and logic. District 49 is a progressive district. The rest of the state looks to us on forward-thinking policy, transit, green energy, healthcare for all, how we address substance abuse, poverty, and crime, cannabis legalization. I don't feel like our current legislator is fighting for the best interest of our locals, and definitely not for hemp farmers. I understand the necessity of working across the aisle, but is it shifting us into a better North Carolina when people are the collateral damage? My business is downtown. I see the rise in homelessness, crime, and how home ownership is unreachable to almost everybody I know. I ask the viewers to ask the question, what has the council or your local legislator done to address the issues of unaffordable housing? I am pushing for higher wages and more unions. I'm demanding we utilize our TDA funds to help our residents have safe, affordable homes. I have been working boots on the ground with farmers and residents of Buncombe to make our community stronger. I will help District 49 thrive instead of just survive. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And now you, Sandra. And you have to unmute.
Hello, okay. First of all, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge my faith and the energy or the force that's within me, which is greater than me and not of me, basically, which has been instrumental in making my decisions as wanting to be someone there to help and to fight for the community. My path of always trying to fight for the underdog has always been something that's, like I said, it's been a part of me. First of all, I say there's not just one reason as my why for running for North Carolina State Senate. First of all, I'd like to say that why, my first why is timing. And the reason I say the timing is because the window of opportunity does not stay open. It closes. And some people would call it your Kairos moment. Well, this is what it is for me. My moment to make a change and my moment to do it now. So when I decided to run for North Carolina State Senate, basically, while being on council, I realized the importance of being at the table. And I also realized the consequences of not being there. Diverse representation is needed, especially when decisions that are being made impacts the underserved population. When I speak of diverse, a lot of people think I'm talking about just Black or race. It's not. When I talk about diverse, I'm speaking of the single mother or the single father who's trying to raise their kids with not enough income to take care of expenses. I'm talking about the families, basically that have the mother and the father who have two incomes and still can't meet those demands. I'm talking about the senior citizens and the retirees, some of whom have operating on 50% less of their incomes, being pushed out of their homes. And basically, I'm talking about also the small business owners. And small business owners, basically, they already have the deck stacked against them. And the reason I say that is because 50% of small business people go out of business within their first year. And then within 10 years, 90% of them go out of business. So this is the things that I'm concerned about also as far as the baby boomers. The baby boomers, they have a lot on them also. Many of them have found themselves as caregivers later in life, only to have to deal with their own personal issues too. So in other words, what I would say to you is I can identify with all of these people. And anything that I can do to make their lives just a little bit better, then that's what I plan to do. And ladies and gentlemen, I truly believe that we really have to bring everyone together because coming together is our strength and unity is our strength. And until we do that, we are basically sort of not giving ourselves a chance to make it work for everyone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. Now you, Julie, it's your turn.
I'm getting I don't know if you all can y'all hear me okay? I was getting a terrible.
It's a little scratchy, but I can hear you. Now I can't.
You hear me at all?
Speak. Say something. I cannot hear you. So maybe we'll just go to the first question and you can put your opening statement into the first question. I'd like everybody to talk briefly about your background, specifically where you grew up, your education, and your prior work experiences. Let's start with you, Taylon.
Yeah, of course. So I really got into the arena of public affairs when my oldest sister was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I watched a system that was not only created to harm, it seemed like it wasn't created for children.
I'm sorry, but that's not, I have that question coming next, why you got into public affairs. I'm specifically interested in your talking about your personal background so people can get to know you, where you grew up, where you went to school, and the different jobs that you've had.
Okay, so I am originally from Arkansas. I moved here almost 8 years ago, and I went to a community college in Arkansas. I did not have money to go to a university first. So I got my core classes at a town called INWAC, and moved up to the university for the ending of my associate's degree. So I jumped right into entrepreneurship. I actually started my first business at the age of 18, and actually have my fourth business now that I'm operating. I like to see visions come into actions. I think that we have unfortunately created too many things around money, and that has made it where me personally, I want to work for myself because I don't feel like a lot of people are treated well in their jobs. Like I said, I feel like I first got into politics, which is a part of my background. I feel like politics is a part of who I am because I have been involved for so long. And I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was just 20 years old. And I saw how terrible our healthcare system was. I racked up medical debt very young. And I saw just so many holes in the systems for people that don't have money. And I mean, a lot of these issues affect people that have money as well, just the same when we talk about addiction and mental health. And I wanted to use some of my experiences, life experience, to plug it in for the greater good. I own two businesses. Simply Extract, it's a hemp extraction company. We started in 2018 after the passing of the hemp legalization bill, which I also helped pass the hemp pilot program here in North Carolina, creating over 1,700 jobs, mostly for farmers, which I do think that is a giant accomplishment for never being in the legislature. And started that business working with hemp farmers across North Carolina, extracting their hemp. Then recently, I've just opened a downtown cafe called The Pot Stirred. We do mushroom coffees, cannabis coffees. It's all focused on normalizing plant medicine, which has been heavy in my background, is trying to get people out of prison for plant medicine, trying to make it more accessible because we are too dependent on our pharmaceutical companies. So that's a little bit more about my background.
Great, thank you. And now you, Sandra.
Yes, okay. I'm actually a native of Asheville. However, I went to Asheville High School, middle school, elementary school. And I left here in 1976 to go and as a flight attendant for U.S. Airways. And it gave me the opportunity to travel pretty much all over the world. We did a coach here at British Airways, so that was where a lot of my international travel came in. And I basically moved back home in 2012 to assist my aging parents, and I decided to stay. I sort of fell in love with Asheville all over again. And the one thing I did notice when I moved back here in 2012, it had changed so much. It was almost like it wasn't the home that I remember leaving. And there were a lot of course, divides. And when I talk about divides, I'm not talking about racial divides. I just saw divides within the whole community and with all the whole framework, and I decided that I wanted to be a part of hopefully sort of making Asheville the best that she can be. And basically, that was my reason for deciding to run for city council. Was I always was on planning and zoning, so basically the next step would be city council. And I can say that after being on city council, I have learned so much and I have grown so much. And I realized the importance of sort of just being here at the table, because without that, then that definitely will not get you the change that we need. And let's see, of course, my other background, I went to UNCA here, majored in art and art history. And I also, what I will say too, the one thing I noticed that when I was here and I was younger, I worked anywhere from Ingles grocery store. I worked there starting at age 17. I worked as a cashier and an office worker. I worked at Sears Roebuck. I worked at Crown Plaza as well. It was at that time it was Great Smokies Hilton as a waitress. And the reason I share those with you is because some of those same jobs I held here in Asheville about 35, 40 years ago, a lot of the minorities cannot hold those jobs now, or not holding those jobs now. So, and that was really a concern for me also in, throwing my hat to the ring.
Okay. Well, thank you. You two just answered my next question. which was going to be what made you first decide to run for public office, not necessarily this office. Let's see if we can get Julie back in now to maybe give a condensed opening statement and talk about your background and why you first decided to run for public office. Are you speaking? Oh, this is not good. I don't hear you. I don't hear you. Do you hear me? Nod your head if you hear me. Okay. What's your situation with your sound? Because I haven't muted you. What is your computer telling you is? Can you go click sound? See, I hate to do this on the air, but we have no choice. Go to your settings and click sound and see which audio is it maybe you have earbuds? Maybe you could try some earbuds. If that's not going to work, maybe you can go to your phone again and just hold your phone. I'm not hearing you. Can you go to your phone? Do you hear me? Can you go off of your computer and go to your phone? Maybe you can write in the chat so I can hear what you're saying, what you're trying to tell me. Okay, I think she's going to try to go onto her phone. Let me see if she comes back in. All right, I'm going to keep going because we can just keep adding these answers to her, these questions to her answers. So let me ask you this, Sandra. This is a good segue to what you said in your opening statement about why you think it's so important to run now. You have not even finished your first term in the city council. You're halfway through your first term. So I would like to know why you were already running for a higher office instead of waiting out that term. And as a corollary to that question, was this your idea to run, or did other people or other organizations suggest it to you?
Okay, Lauren, thank you very much for that question. First of all, basically, as you know, I'm not a spring chicken. So it's like, time is of the essence for me. And as far as being on council before I seek a higher office, is because while on council, I found myself being a lot of the things that I wanted to do. I kept getting the response, well, Sandra, that's handled on the state level. We can't do this because it's on the state level. So finally, I had heard enough of that, because if I'm going to make an impact, I'm going to put myself out here and dedicate my time and energy and life to trying to make change. I needed to be at a place where I could actually make the change, where I think I would be most effective. And fortunately, that was the Senate. So of course, that was the next step for me. So it was a decision, basically. Of course, people talk to me about a lot of different decisions. That's what I would like to do, or what positions I was interested in, or whatever. So I'm not going to say that did not occur. However, I made my final decision to make the important decision of what I felt was best for me, and to be able to do the things that I wanted to do to help the people in Western North Carolina.
Great, thank you. And we got Julie back here.
All right. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you now. Awesome.
Sorry.
Let me just ask the second question to Taylon, and then you will be able to put all those answers into one question, and I will review it for you. So the question is, trying to figure out why people are running for this office at this time. Taylon, you are running for state senate. I'm curious as to why you didn't start a more local office like city council, for instance.
Well, and mine is very similar to what Sandra stated was the local level commissions and city councils, they really don't have a lot of power or impact on our community. And that is because of Dillon's rule. We have shifted our power away from our local communities and into Raleigh. That makes it really hard to hold our local positions accountable because it is very easy for them to say, well, I'd love to help you on this, but I can't do anything until Raleigh signs off on it. So, similar to Sandra, I don't feel like locally there's a whole lot we can do. On a state level, we can be able to work towards getting that power back to the local community. That has not happened. But I think as far as what it was for me is I'm looking around a city that I love and that I'm a part of and watching communities break up because people can't still live here. And I think I'm just at the state of feeling like we're on this impending doom as a state where our Republican legislators are taking over. They're causing our maps to, be gerrymandered. We are losing our voting rights. We can't afford our homes. We have low wages. I think for me, it's more, I'm not seeing a lot being done and quick enough. And I feel like if young people don't step up, if a next generation of leaders don't step up, if working class people don't step up, it's not going to go well for us.
Right. Okay. Now to Julie. Julie, I had asked you, I'm going to ask you to dispense with your opening statement because you've had the advantage of incumbency. I think a lot of people are familiar with you. You'll have a closing statement. But I was just kind of interested if you could give viewers who are not familiar with you a little sense of your background, why you first decided to run for public office, why you decided to go from city council to state legislature. And then the next question that relates to what I just asked these two ladies, with three of your colleagues leaving the legislature, partially because it's so difficult to get anything done with a Republican-dominated legislature, and you told me that none of your bills have made it out of had a committee hearing, much less made it into law. Why are you running for re-election?
Okay, so that's a lot. I will do my best to go fast. First, a little bit of background, and again, I think a lot of people know this about me, so I'll condense this tremendously. I grew up in Atlanta, but my mother was born in Asheville and raised in Western North Carolina, so I spent my life, my childhood coming up here. I moved to Asheville 14 years ago to become the executive director of what was then the Western North Carolina Alliance, now Mountain True. I am an environmental attorney by training and practice. I've been a public interest environmental advocate since about 1999, so almost 25 years. And I ran for office in 2015. I ran for city council because, frankly, I thought I could be helpful. The challenges that Asheville is facing now are very similar to the ones that Asheville was facing in 2015, and I thought that my background in environmental issues, which is extraordinarily important to the voters of this community, the environment, transportation, land use, working with and representing neighborhood groups and associations for a number of years, just general community engagement. It has been part of my job for about 15 years to engage people in the business of government as activists and advocates, and I'm very proud of that work. And I decided that having done that for a number of years on the outside of government, that it was time for me to take the step to be on the inside of government and affecting change there. And I have a little bit of a different view maybe from the other two on the role of local government. I loved almost every minute of my time on city council. I think I affected great change during the time that I was on council. I actually think local government impacts local communities a tremendous amount, far more than anything that happens in Raleigh. The local government is absolutely what mostly impacts the day-to-day lives of people in the city of Asheville. It is absolutely true that there are a lot of things the city cannot do because of North Carolina's constitutional structure. It is the reason Sandra is running. It sounds like it's part of the motivation for Taylon. It was absolutely my motivation for running as well. Having been on council for, at that time, 4 years, it was very clear that a lot of the problems couldn't be solved except in Raleigh. So we're all unified in that. But again, I think local government is the place to start. I wouldn't change one day of my time there. I ran for the Senate because the seat was open. Terry Van Dyne was in this seat before me. I would never have challenged a sitting incumbent who was doing a great job, as she was, but she decided to run for lieutenant governor, and so the seat was open. And that's the only reason that I ran for that seat. And I'm certainly happy to be there. And even though, as you say, none of the bills that I have introduced have gotten a hearing in committee, just so everyone knows, that is true for almost every Democrat in the Senate. I am not unusual in that at all. That doesn't mean that I have not gotten anything done. And I'm happy to talk about that now or later. But I have managed to get a tremendous amount done in the year that I have been there.
Well, that leads me to my next question, which is, what is your greatest accomplishment in public service? And I think, Taylon, you already answered that question when you talked about the hemp bill. So I'm going to let Sandra answer. Since you've been in the city council, has there been something that you have initiated and shepherded through to completion? And you need to unmute.
First of all, on council, as far as my biggest, I think, accomplishment that I actually have is I was the single person on council who was against removal of the monument. I know that was a controversial stance, but there was a reason behind it and there was a purpose behind it. What had happened with that particular situation, it was more or less a situation where it was in this community. Like I said, when I came home, the community to me was not the community that I left. It had become so divided. There were racial divides, community divides, organizational divides, which that still exist. But the one thing that I did notice here is that Blacks had not taken on their own mission. Other people were deciding what was best for the Black community. That was a big concern of mine. And that was my whole stance behind the monument. Because basically when the monument situation came up, the first time I heard about it, I went to Esther and said, Esther, look, can we have more conversation about this? And she was like, well, if you don't have four, people, then, it just sort of like just fell. So anyway, that was the reason why I made my stance, because what had happened was when I got out and talked to people in the community, many people in the community, they were saying, no, I didn't want to remove the monument. No, I didn't want, that didn't make a difference to me. And a lot of people were concerned about it. So, but yet and still, the statement that was coming from the council was that Blacks, they were doing it for the Blacks in the community because the Blacks were hurt, the Blacks had suffered. And I'm sitting here saying, no, it was not done for the Blacks. It was done for other reasons. And I felt that some of the motives were ulterior motives. And I felt that that particular stance, taking that stance at a time where we as Blacks were trying to get on our feet, I thought that would hurt the Black movement. And that was the reason I took that stance. And like I said, I'm happy I made it, basically, because now I had people come out and say, okay, we're doing it for us because it makes us feel bad about it. So, and those are conversations that we needed to have.
Okay.
That we still continue to have. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate your elaborating on that. It wasn't exactly the accomplishment. It was talking about a stance, but Julie, maybe you can talk about the greatest accomplishment, and you could go back to city council if you want, or you could talk about something that you've done in the legislature.
Am I limited to one? There, I want to go back because this is several years ago now. But during my first year on council, I did two things that were instrumental and I think revolutionary in this community. Number one, I led the process of creating a working group with NCDOT to focus on the I-26 connector project. That's a project I had been working on for about a decade, well, literally since the week I walked into Asheville. And that working group has made tremendous changes and improvements to that project. And it continues to work today to make tremendous changes and improvements to that project, reducing its impact, saving homes, saving businesses, a whole host of improvements that the community will see when that project does move forward. So that was one thing that I did. Literally, my first full meeting of council, we went down that road. The second thing was the initiation and creation of the Energy Innovation Task Force, which was the partnership between Duke Energy and the city of Asheville and Buncombe County that ultimately resulted in the elimination of the need for a new peaker plant here in the region, and has helped drive and increase the amount of solar and battery storage here in Western North Carolina, and has resulted in the creation of the Blue Horizons Project, which again is a program that continues today to help individuals and businesses use less energy, install solar energy. Wildly successful program there. In the legislature, I would say the biggest accomplishment has been my work on the bipartisan clean energy bill that passed last year that will get North Carolina to 70% carbon reduction by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. We're the only legislature only state we're only one of two states in the Southeast to have passed a clean energy standard like that, and the only one with a Republican-led legislature. And I was part of the 4-person team of Senate Democrats working hand in hand with the governor's office and negotiating with Republican leadership to get that bill passed.
Great. This was a future question, but I want to jump to it right now since you just brought it up. Duke Energy. Taylon, in a Sunrise DSA Climate Forum, you said, quote, "And when we look at the current state legislator and the bills that are being written, she is working very closely with Duke Energy. I think we have to look very closely at that when we look at our current legislators. We have to look at who's in the back pocket of Duke and who is working directly with them. And I will do all I can to break up Duke." So 2 questions for you. Do you really believe that Julie Mayfield is in the back pocket of Duke Energy? And how specifically do you intend to break them up? What steps would you take if you were elected?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, when I speak of the legislator, I mean it as a whole. I do feel like Julie said, she was one of 4 Democrats that were willing to work in this Republican bill. And this bill was opposed from a ton of climate organizations. They said this was not good enough. We don't feel like 2050 is good enough for carbon neutrality. I don't feel like Duke Energy needs to be sitting in while the legislator is building these bills, because Duke Energy does not have our best interest at heart. They are they're monopoly. Period. Monopolies are terrible for America. It makes it where we have less ability to decide how we want to consume our energy. And when Duke Energy is in the room with all Republicans and 4 Democrats, it does make me weary of what's happening behind closed doors. We want to know what's happening. I feel like that is the biggest thing here for me, is I don't feel like the Asheville community has any idea what's going on in Raleigh. And I do blame the legislator for that. I feel like more can happen when the community is involved and when the community has a say in what's going on. And personally, I don't feel like that has been happening.
Julie, would you like to defend that bill, both the content of the bill and the process, and specifically address Taylon's comment regarding transparency?
Sure. So to be clear, this bill went through two different processes, and this on the House side, there were negotiations with Duke Energy and other organizations with legislators in the room. That was on the House side. On the Senate side, that was not the case, and Duke Energy was not part of the complete and total rewrite of the bill that happened on the Senate side. They did not know what was going on. They were not in the room. And in fact, there wasn't really a room, right? So the way this was working, this was all on paper, much to my chagrin. I mean, I think this is not the way that we would have drafted this bill had the Democrats been in charge of this process. We were handed this process by the Republican leadership because that's what happens at the legislature. The Republican leadership says how it's going to work, and you play that game. So the way they played this game was the Republicans drafted a new bill, sent it over to the governor. The governor and that team of 4 Democrats worked together on the bill, sent back changes, and it was an exchange of paper until very close to the end, when there finally were, I think, some face-to-face conversations with the governor's staff and the Republican leadership. So there wasn't a room. There certainly wasn't a smoke-filled room, and there wasn't a room with Duke Energy in it. I didn't have conversations with Duke Energy about the bill until the bill became public. And that was true for everyone on the Senate Democratic side. Now, so that is how that bill worked. To the point of transparency, absolutely. Would I love for every bill, meaningful bill, to have the big table that has all the stakeholders around it? Absolutely. That's how I do my job at Mountain True. That's how you get good policy. That is simply not the way it works in Raleigh. And there have been processes like that. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Clean Smokestacks Act. That was a bill born out of Western North Carolina, led by Western North Carolina legislators at that time. That was a big table that had everyone around it. But that was a very different time in politics than where we are now. And those big tables, the Republicans don't tend to create those big tables. That's not the way they like to do business. And again, we can either play that game and participate in the process that is open to us, or we can stand outside of it. I'm always going to choose to be part of something, because that is the only way that you can try to make change. Doesn't mean you have to support it at the backside when it comes out. And to the point of the support for this bill, there were a number of groups that did not think it went far enough, that did not think it was as protective of low-income people. And I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. But as I said before, this is the only clean energy standard adopted by a Republican legislature. We had a moment to turn the governor's clean energy plan into law, and we took it. And we can fix it and amend it and work at the Utilities Commission to make it better. But if we had not grasped this moment, we would have lost it.
Let me ask you a follow-up question on that, because as a member of DSA and Sunrise myself, I did call you after their allegations were made public last year. And you said that you disputed a lot of their worries because you have faith in the Public Utilities Commission. You said they were appointed by a Democratic governor. I'm specifically concerned about this new bill or this new plan that Duke Energy wants to implement to really get rid of net metering. And that is coming before the Utilities Commission. Do you think that Utilities Commission is going to protect net metering? Because a lot of people, including myself, have just spent a lot of money putting solar panels on our roofs because we're trying to do our part for the environment. And it's bad enough that, unlike the state of California, they don't give everybody a state rebate like I was able to get in California. You have to apply for it. I applied twice in the year that I could, did not get it. And now the net metering is going to go away. What can you say about this Utilities Commission?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is net metering might not go away. The Utilities Commission has not made a decision on that yet. The second thing I want to say is that this has nothing to do with House Bill 951. People who are unhappy with 951 are trying to peg this issue to 951. but it has nothing to do with it. The two are totally separate issues. So the Utilities Commission, this was an effort, and this was an effort with both Duke Energy and environmental stakeholders at the table. And the proposed settlement is supported by a number of environmental groups, including and in clean energy groups, including the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, Southern Environmental Law Center, and I believe the Sierra Club. This is a proposal that they have submitted jointly with Duke Energy to the Utilities Commission for approval. A lot of groups also don't agree with it and are challenging it and asking the Utilities Commission to put it on hold and not make a decision yet, including, importantly, I think the Attorney General Josh Stein, who is taking a look at it and has real concerns about it because of its impact on consumers and people who have invested in solar energy. So we don't have an answer yet from the Utilities Commission about whether they're going to postpone their decision on this. I predict that they will, because there is so much controversy around it. And as we know, under 951, the Utilities Commission and Duke Energy is in the process of creating the first climate plan called for by that legislation. And that'll be submitted in May, draft plan in May. And I hope the Utilities Commission will just put this on hold, take a look at the draft plan, and then make its decision on the net metering in light of the climate plan that's moving through. I will say, though, that the current net metering rules run out in 2025. So something new will have to be created by 2025. And my understanding from the environmental groups that have been part of this discussion is that they were trying to get ahead of that deadline and create something without sort of the pressure cooker approach and mentality that would, in that case, really, frankly, favor Duke Energy rather than consumers. So.
Okay. Before we go on to the next issue, which is going to be a living wage, I would like to know if Sandra would like to weigh in on Duke Energy. Are you happy with Duke Energy? Would you like to make changes?
The only thing I was concerned about, I was concerned more or less about the mid and low income people and the cost it was going to cost them for that particular program. And I was concerned because I felt that the bill did not go far enough by people not being there. No one really addressed the impact it was going to make on the people in West and anywhere, on the cost. And sometimes that happens when no one's there at the table that actually identifies with those who are less fortunate, don't have the resources. And I feel that by no one being at the table to understand that part, that was probably why it was never really brought into the forefront when they were working on this particular program.
Do you think Duke Energy as a monopoly should be broken up?
Hey, Lauren, can I just answer that, what Sandra just said? Because it's not true. The Senate Democrats and the governor proposed 23 different options to protect low and moderate income ratepayers. 23. We are very much in touch with the interests and the advocates that are concerned with that. And we proposed 23 options. And the Senate Republicans rejected all but one, which was the one that ended up in the bill. And we all came close, very close, to saying that is not enough. And
that's what I think that should have happened. That should have happened. I just think that the bill was important to them. The bill was important to Duke. The bill was important to them. I think holding out for more, I think it actually could have benefited, because the thing is, of course, if you play into it, but we had nothing to lose. I mean,
well, I would disagree with that respectfully. We have a clean energy standard that will get us to carbon neutrality by 2050, and we would not have had that had we walked away from the bill. And there's no question about that.
Okay, we can't go back and forth because I've got so many issues I want to discuss, but I think now, getting back, I want to ask Taylon, because I don't think you answered the question about the specific steps you would take. And I agree with you. I did a whole show with Matt Stoller, who is one of the nation's foremost authorities on monopolization. And I do think it's bad. I think it's bad for consumers. I think it's bad for workers, and I think it's one of the major causes of wealth and income inequality. And I personally work to try to, when PG&E in California declared bankruptcy, to try to get them taken over by the state. But even in California, where 3/4 of our legislators are Democrats, it couldn't happen. So I'm really curious, because it's wonderful to say they should be broken up, and maybe that we should have public power. That's my personal viewpoint as an activist. But I'm curious, when you become a legislator and you're not an activist anymore, you have to work with existing law and with other people who don't share your views. So I'm curious, since you made that sort of promise, I will do what I can to break up the monopoly of Duke Energy. What specific steps would you do?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And when we talk about breaking anything up, I think where we begin is to call out the harm that they are causing the communities and letting communities know what harm Duke is causing them. I think that we can create a path forward for local energy companies to thrive, but we can't do that when Duke Energy won't allow local energy companies to be a part of it. They shouldn't dictate the laws of how we do energy. I think we can create a system where local governments can allow, maybe even demand, us to have alternate energy companies other than Duke. Maybe we subsidize those companies while we begin to level out the playing field. The hardest thing right now, I believe, when trying to break up any monopoly, is the fact that we don't have the campaign finance reform bills being pushed that we need. Duke will never be broken up when our legislators are getting, contributions from people that work there. We will never be able to break this up if we don't address the fact that money and politics is keeping them from being broke up. So I think, to me, the first thing is addressing it, calling it out for what it is, which is they're harming us. Ultimately, we cannot move to renewable energy when we have a company that's making this much profit. I think it begins with the conversations, and then it begins with trying to create actions with our local government to have the ability to have local companies compete with Duke Energy.
Well, you know what? There's nobody who agrees more with you about money and power, money and politics than me. I've been working with Move to Amend for 10 years now, trying to get big money out of politics. But it is kind of a federal issue that I don't know that we can solve on the state level here. Getting to the next issue, which is working class people are faced with low wages and rising expenses, especially this year since the pandemic. We have terrible inflation. And I'd like to know what each of you think should be the minimum wage in North Carolina. Do you think that it should be based on the cost of living in a particular county, or should it be statewide? How would you convince your Republican colleagues to even consider a minimum wage increase? And like I said, relating to the previous question, it's all well and good to talk about what is ideal, but we have to talk about how we're going to get there in a practical way. So let's start with you, Julie, on the minimum wage.
Thanks. So one of the first bills I introduced was a bill a year ago to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour across the board. We have blown past that, so that's not the number anymore. I don't know what the number is in North Carolina now. I heard somebody say $24 an hour recently. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I don't know that anybody's done the study to know what that is. But the market has blown past 15, so we know it's not 15 anymore. I do think the state should set a minimum wage much higher, obviously, than where it is now, and higher than 15. And then the other key thing that needs to happen to address your variability question is local governments need to have the ability to require higher wages within their jurisdiction. And this gets at the whole issue of local control that you'll hear a lot from me and the other candidates as well. And it's not that we ever had that power. It's just that the legislature was nicer about letting local governments have flexibility to do things within their own jurisdictions. This legislature, the Republican-led legislature, is not nice about that. And so we do need to get back to that. So that's how I would address it.
Sandra?
Statewide and local flexibility.
First of all, how I would approach this with the Republicans is basically Republicans are concerned about entitlements. And basically, I'm like, if people are paid decent salaries to be able to live, then guess what? We could cut back on entitlements. So basically, I would actually approach them from that perspective, and I would actually have to sit down and really. And I think it cannot be anything where, of course, we could set a basic minimum wage from the state. Like she said, 15 is not going to do it, more or less like I think 18 or something like that. And then from there, basically, I think the local areas should be responsible for sort of setting the tone depending on the cost of living in that particular area. And as you know, here in Asheville, the cost of living is so high that we would have to adjust the incomes accordingly. And I think that is workable. And I think that's the approach I would use basically and because, like I said, Republican Party basically what they are concerned about, their biggest concern is spending money on those who do not have, and they call it entitlement, basically bottom line. So I'm saying pay a decent wage so we don't have to do that.
Interesting. Taylon?
Yeah, so I think one of the first things we have to do is become a non-right to work state. That is the biggest thing that is going against us right now is we can't have strong unions in this state. So that's keeping our teachers from being able to collectively bargain and ask for more money. Our state employees can't unionize. And really, even the people that are unionized here don't have the powers that most unions have. When we don't have strong unions, it doesn't give other businesses a reason to compete. Because what are they going to compete with money-wise? I think I can make a great argument in Raleigh because I am a small business owner. I don't pay any of my employees less than $18 an hour because I realize when my employees make money, they go spend money. When they have enough money to just keep a roof over their head, it makes our economy thrive more because they have extra spending money. I think one of the biggest arguments is this is going to wipe out the small business owner. So I think having a small business owner championing to higher wages makes sense. I also feel like it needs to be tied to our cost of living. The cost of living in Asheville is going to be separate than Charlotte. So I don't think us just assigning $1 amount makes sense for us, especially as rent here is higher than almost anywhere in North Carolina. So I think we have to be mindful of the fact that everything costs more here, and it's probably going to continue to go up unless we do something about it. So I think having stronger unions, not being a right to work state is how we will progress and get our wages higher.
Yes, and I've done a lot of shows with union organizers. I hope to have Chris Smalls back on my show again with the incredible Amazon labor victory. I hope to bring him on with some Amazon workers in Raleigh who want to know how they can, benefit from his great organizing success. So I'm really working on putting that show together. Next question goes to what you just mentioned, which is housing costs. Yes, rents have increased in Asheville 25% in 2021 alone. And, the more people that if they lose their rent, they could end up being homeless. It's one of the major and growing causes of homelessness. So what do you think can be done about housing costs on the state level? I think there are a lot of federal and local cures, but let's just address ourselves to the state level. Julie?
It's a great question, and it's an issue, it's a challenge all across the state, and it's an issue that the legislature has not started wrestling with. I have started a conversation within my colleagues in the Western North Carolina caucus to see if we can try to get some consensus there in that group, and then start moving a little bit wider in our respective houses, respective chambers. There are a couple of things we can do. One is actually a bill that Senator Chuck Edwards, a Republican, introduced last year that would allow, so one of the biggest problems with, and one of the things that drives up home prices is the prevalence of single family zoning in every community across the state. Senator Edwards introduced a bill that is actually a really progressive, in most places, a pretty progressive policy. And that is to allow in all zoning districts, including single family zoning districts, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. And so that would serve to increase the density of housing, increase the amount of housing. And I think that is something we can do. I think that is something we should do at the state level, and just take that issue sort of out of the hands of local governments. That proposal, I will tell you, was not only not very popular with Republicans, it was not very popular with Democrats either. But I do think it's something we should explore. Another thing we can do is put a lot more money in the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, which is the financial arm of state government that funds affordable housing. Buncombe County tends to get maybe one project a year out of that pot of money. And if we funded it more, we could get more projects. And these projects tend to be larger, somewhere between 150 and 250 units, as opposed to the much smaller things that we get now. Those are two things. The other way to deal with this problem, though, because it's just a scale, right, is we can increase the money that's in people's pockets. And we've already talked about some of that. Raising wages is one. Expanding Medicaid and bringing down the cost of healthcare is another. Expanding one of my particular issues, expanding transit, making it easier for people to not own a car, which is a very expensive thing for people to own. So trying to put more money in people's pockets, as well as bringing the cost of housing down. Those are the ways that I would tackle it.
Yes, and I've got questions addressing the last two things that you mentioned that I will get into after I give Sandra and Taylon an opportunity to answer the question about what we can do, what you can do on the state level to address the issues of the high cost of housing. Let's start with you, Sandra.
Okay. First of all, I think it should be tailored to location and locale. So when North Carolina actually looks into approaching dealing with this, like you said, setting aside more monies. Right now, North Carolina has a lot of money sitting down there in their funds. So increasing that money in the housing finance division, and also what they need to do is actually, in North Carolina, we do not actually have, the laws are so restricted here for us, the builders. We need to start really working with relaxing some of those builder laws, especially for the larger developers, so they can come in here and start building. Also, we may need to look into subsidizing the larger builders to come in to be able to build large percentages of home, because right now, even in this area, we have a lot of small builders. We need large builders coming in and building lots of housing. And like I said, if we have to subsidize them to some degree to keep the prices down and make it affordable, this is something that we need to do. And it should be set by case basis, depending on the cities and the needs that's there.
Taylon, what do you think of what Sandra just said, that we need large housing developers?
I understand where she's coming, because having a large supply of homes, of course, is going to bring the price down. I'm concerned by how she said it, because I think when I hear, let's just bring big developers in and subsidize them to build, me as a farmer, me as someone that's got a farm out in Leicester, my concern is how much is that going to affect a community that is already, I feel like we're overdeveloping and not being super thoughtful in the way that we're doing it. So I understand subsidizing, but I also feel like if we're doing any kind of subsidies, it really just needs to be focused on affordable housing, protecting our lower income people first, because yes, having a higher supply is going to help us, but we have so many people moving here. We're going to have to blockade these housing to say, these are for our community members first. These are for lower income people that need it now. We have over 500 people that are homeless currently. So I think we must address this. And I think doing down payment subsidies for people living in historically redline districts, I think that makes sense. I do think we're going to have to create vouchers for rent here, because it's going so high that we can't keep up. we have to raise our wages. Yes, we have to focus on creating communities for the people that are currently unhoused. And we have to be smart about development when we're doing it, because if we're looking around, we're pushing so many people out that are currently living in, they're under house. There's a lot of people under house that we don't want to push out. We have to be smart in development. And I think a lot of this is going to be breaking up the TDA and using some of that money to help our homeless people and the people that live here first. And 75% of that goes to marketing. I don't think we need all this marketing. Hotels can pay to market their own companies. And I think we have to use some of that funding to help the people that have been hurt the most. And affordable housing, I feel like, is one of the number one issues in our community. And I'm trying to understand why no bills have been put forward by Julie around this. I know the Republicans don't want it, but I think even if it's an act of I'm listening to my community and what they want by putting bills forward, I think it's something we have to do in the legislature.
Well, I was going to jump to my question. Wait a second. I was going to jump to my question about development, but first I want to let Julie answer that because it was directly addressed to her.
Sure. I do have a bill that would reallocate the TDA tax and would make other changes to how that money is used, expand the board to include more interest. I have that. It was one of the first bills that was drafted. I was advised that it would be harmful to the cause for me to introduce that bill rather than to allow my Republican colleague in Buncombe County to introduce that bill. I respected that strategy decision. And we will be introducing that bill this session, this short session, in order, as I said, to do those three things, to reallocate the tax. It will not break up the TDA. If you break up the TDA, then there's no money at all. So the TDA has to remain intact for there to be occupancy tax dollars. The question is, how much of it do we get? And I think we're going to make some, we will make some big, significant changes to the program the way it is right now this year.
Sandra, you wanted to say something.
The only thing I was saying is when Taylor was saying that I was trying to open it up, I always said affordable, subsidized, affordable, builders for affordable. I was not talking about opening it up. I'm just trying to take care of that particular sector. And one thing about, like I said, one thing I'm concerned about, they talk about all these down payment assistance programs. Basically, the people that we need to help, they can't even qualify for the loan. So down payment assistance is not going to help them. And I think we need to start looking at things that we do put out there to sort of help people that are not really helping. And I see this a lot. So I just wanted to just make that clarification.
Okay. I think a lot of, people ought to know that in the last 40 years of neoliberalism, we've had an intentional disinvestment in public housing and in Section 8 vouchers. And I think this is a question for somebody running for federal office, how we're going to get money to build. And I know it was in the Build Back Better program, $40 billion for public housing. I know that even Chuck Schumer, who is fearing a challenge from AOC, has a bill for $80 billion. And AOC herself in the Green New Deal has $120 billion. So this is an issue that really can be and should be solved at the federal level. But getting to my question on development, a lot of people in Asheville, and because I've been here for 1 year and 3 months and I read the paper and I'm in the political groups on Facebook and on Nextdoor, feel that the city is concentrating too much on the tourists, and the developments are all for the tourists, hotels, breweries, market rate housing, and many landlords are even converting long-term rentals into short-term Airbnbs because it's more profitable. And that trend accelerated over the pandemic because a lot of people didn't want to stay in a hotel. So I'd like to know, for the two of you who've had a chance to vote on development, Sandra, you on the city council, and Julie, when you were on the city council before, is there ever a development that you opposed, Sandra? And the same question goes to you, Julie. And then when I ask it of Taylon, I'm going to ask her to think about a development that she would have opposed.
Who first?
Sandra first. Have you opposed any developments that have come before you on the city council?
Unfortunately, I can say that I have not. And the reason I say that is because pretty much we need housing here, and it's such a void for it. So no, I did not. However, we did require the developers to provide a certain percentage to go toward affordable. Basically, AMIs as low as 60%, in some case 30%, where they had the vouchers. So that was more or less what we were concerned with, is making sure that whatever builder we let in, they did add to our supply of affordable housing.
Julie, when you were on city council, did you vote against any developments?
I certainly voted against several hotels. There are at least 3 that I can think of, and there might have been more. I was on council for 5 years. For probably a year and a half of that, we were under the moratorium, the hotel moratorium. So anyway, yes, there were a handful of hotels. I am not sure. I think there might have been a couple of residential developments that I voted against initially because they did not have the percentage of affordable housing that we were asking for. But I believe most of those came back with more affordable housing. So yeah, those were, yes. And I want to put on the table a tool for more affordable housing that actually none of us mentioned, that is a key important tool that I actually introduced a bill to allow, and that is inclusionary zoning. That so that we don't have to, it's not a question of when new development comes to the city for approval about whether it's going to have affordable housing or how much. The city needs to have the authority to just pass that ordinance and require X% or X number of units or whatever it is. And that would just make all of it much easier.
Yeah, Taylon, let me ask you a question, because you haven't had the opportunity to vote on any of these projects, but to use a specific example that I covered last year, which was the Charlotte Street development. You know, I interviewed Callie Warner, who's an activist, part of Save Charlotte Street, that didn't want to tear down those historic houses because A, they were historic, they gave character to the neighborhood. B, a lot of them were deeply affordable. And C, there was a lot of ancient trees there that, you know, provide beauty as well as suck carbon from the atmosphere. Where did you stand on that Charlotte Street issue is part 1 of my question. And part 2, do you think there's too much tourism in Asheville?
So the first part of your question, I did not feel like those homes should be torn down for more development as long as there wasn't, I feel like, a lot of listening that happened to the community when the community came and said, you know, this is harmful. You know, there's not much affordable housing. These are people that have been in these houses for a long time. These were people that then had to suddenly relocate because the developer felt like he was going to make more money. I do feel like we haven't handled tourism appropriately. I do feel like we've invested a lot of money in marketing our city without really trying to rebuild infrastructure, transit. Our transit, it's not what it should be. And I feel like when we're starting to look forward to changing our infrastructure, we want all these bike lanes. We want to be this progressive city, but if we can't get our buses or enough bus drivers to get our buses where they need to be on time, it keeps people from being able to get to work, being able to get home. It's like these little nuances will keep us from progressing if we don't focus in on just these bare basics of being able to ride a bus and feel safe and like you're going to get somewhere on time. For me, I'm a small business owner. My business is in downtown Asheville. So I understand that tourism is such an important piece of local business owners' businesses as well. I'm not anti-tourism. I understand the part it plays, but I think we're not being mindful enough of the communities that are being affected when we're putting giant developments in. As far as something that I would have opposed, you know, I think the Flatiron building is a big one. We had 70 local businesses inside of Flatiron, and we had a vote saying basically we're going to turn this into a hotel without knowing that there's any parking downtown, especially for business owners trying to park downtown. But the Flatiron building, I would have opposed that. And I do feel like that was something that should have been opposed by our city council.
Well, I'm going to jump ahead to transportation because you just mentioned it, and we will be getting back to homelessness, substance use disorder, healthcare. They were earlier in my list of questions, but since you mentioned transportation, it kind of segues into that. With the cost of housing being so high in the downtown Asheville, people are forced to live further and further out. Some people drive an hour to work each way. And not only does that take time out of their lives to be with their families and to do volunteer or recreational activities, it it makes them have to spend more money in gas. And we see what's happened now since the Russian invasion. The cost of gas has gone up significantly. And I understand that the gas tax, which funds our highways, has not increased in many years. I, as an electric car owner, did notice that I paid $150 when I registered my vehicle when I moved here, and I have absolutely no problem with that. But as we know, not that many people drive electric cars here. So how do you think that the state should get their highways paid for, short of increasing the gas tax, which would already burden a low-income people? Or do you think that they should redirect money, as Taylon indicated, towards mass transit, improving our buses, or maybe even some sort of shuttle buses from these exurbia communities? And let's start with you, Julie.
Great question. So this question of how we fund our transportation system is front and center in Raleigh right now, because for the last several years, the NCDOT has not had enough money. They ran out of money, or they came close to running out of money, and just have not had the money to keep their projects on track. So clearly, the system that we have is not working. Some of us have known that for a long time, but it's now clear to everyone. There was a Blue Ribbon Commission appointed by the governor a couple of years ago. They issued their report just over a year ago and made a range of recommendations for how to change that funding option. That report now sits in the Senate Transportation Committee, of which I am a member, and we will be wrestling with that issue in the coming, hopefully, maybe a little bit this year and certainly next year. So there are a range of options. One is, certainly as EVs increase, to make sure that, and I own an EV and have since 2017, making sure that EV drivers, pay our fair share to maintain the roads that we use. Some of the other options are, having the tax be not associated with gasoline, but with some combination of how much you drive every year and how heavy your car is. So heavier cars have more impact on the road. If you drive a lot, then you should probably pay more. So it's sort of getting at the actual usage and impact that you as a driver have. Now, there are problems with that. What if you do most of your driving out of state? People are also a little wiggy about the, sort of the big brother-ish, why should I report to you how many miles I drive every year? That kind of thing. So these are not easy solutions, but we do have to fix it. The other piece I would say is that Governor Cooper issued an executive order earlier this year that mandates the creation of a clean transportation plan that will make recommendations to decarbonize our transportation sector. A lot of that will be focused on EVs and EV infrastructure, but there will be other options. One of those is going to be, and actually the executive order already contains this language, that NCDOT should be looking to redirect its expenditures of state and federal dollars, mostly federal dollars, to projects that help decarbonize the transportation sector, rather than just go through business as usual. So that will mean increased funding for transit, bike lanes, sidewalks, greenways, things like that, all of that multimodal transportation infrastructure. And that's exactly what we have needed for a long, long time. Interestingly, right now under state law, state dollars cannot be used to fund that kind of infrastructure to fund a standalone bike lanes, sidewalks, things like that. If they're part of a larger project, they can be, but not standalone. And that's something that we're going to have to change. So next year will be very heavy in the legislature on turning those recommendations into policy. And as a member of the Transportation Committee, I'm looking forward to that work.
Sandra, I want to ask you if you like those recommendations and if you have any that you would add.
No, I do not. Julie did a great job. She's an expert in that area. She's been in transportation, since city council. So I totally would like to leave it up to her. And I think she did a great job in explaining the options.
Taylon, how about yourself?
Yeah, I will say similarly. I feel like Julie knows her stuff about transit. I think that it is exciting that the Infrastructure and Jobs Act got over $100 billion in legislation for our highways and infrastructure projects. And I know that's on a federal level, but that will help the state of North Carolina. And I think we have to think bigger about transportation. I do think that I love going to Canada because they have these train systems, high-speed train systems that can get you anywhere, and it's connecting communities in these new ways, across the entire country. And we can get there. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, but when we can connect a state from mountains to sea, we can create an economy that works for rural people too. The majority of our state are technically what we call rural people. If they had access to a train that could get them to the city, could get them back to their countryside to go to bed where they want to live, I think that's powerful for our communities. And I think we need to really be pushing this regardless of if the Republicans want it. I think having these conversations of we want transit, we want trains that connects the state, I think that is our next move.
Yeah, I like that idea. Now, another major concern of voters is access to and cost of health care. I've been a great advocate for Medicare for All since 2004. I know that it is a federal bill, but I'm curious to know each of your stands on Medicare for All. Do you support it? And then and say why or why not, by the way. And second part of the question on healthcare is, how do you think the legislature can help with providing healthcare in addition to approving Medicaid expansion, which I'm sure you are all in favor of? Let's start with you, Sandra, on Medicare for All.
Yes, I support Medicare for All, especially being in that age group where I definitely see the need. And also because a lot of times the things that Medicare does not cover are things that actually it's expensive for the seniors to actually be able to get those services. And what happens with that, if they're not able to get certain services, it ends up making other illnesses even worse, which costs basically more. So I'm definitely for the Medicare expansion. For Medicare and also Medicaid expansion. And the reason for the Medicaid expansion is because in light of what's going on with the aftermath of COVID and the unknown effects of COVID, I think, and also the mental illness that we're dealing with and the drug addictions and things of that nature, we have to do what we can to get it expanded because we're going to need that. And it's costing the states and everyone more if we do not address it. So in the long run, so definitely.
Any other ways besides Medicaid expansion to get health care to people? Any other out-of-the-box ideas that you can think of?
To get it to them?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, let me see if Taylon has an idea before I give an idea that I have, since I'm not running.
Okay.
Taylon, what do you think? First of all, I think you're for Medicare for All. I've seen you at the forum. You said that you are. And Medicaid expansion, obviously. What other ideas do you have to increase access to healthcare? We also have a situation where we have our hospitals being privatized, and they're also closing down a lot of rural hospitals.
I am 100% for Medicare for All, and unfortunately, a lot of people in the Democratic Party feels like this is undoable. And I think that those people are not up for the fight that I am up for, because too many people are dying because they can't access their money, because they can't get their drugs, because they can't get access to the health care they need. Being someone with Crohn's disease and racking up medical debt, I understand that it's unfair that poor people can't get the treatment that they need. I think we have to expand our mental health care resources, because that is really the core of a lot of our problems. If people can't have access to the mental health care that they need, these are the people that end up homeless. These are people that end up treating themselves with substances that are addicting. This is the reason our crime is going up, because people can't afford to get the help that they need. So then they turn to crime to get this help. And I think that ultimately, one, yes, expanding Medicaid. I think we just need to have a tax across the entire US that we all pay into. Universal health care, Medicare for all. It's not a hard concept, but it has been given to us through propaganda of we can't do this because it is going to harm insurance companies. It's going to harm the people that make so much money off of our drugs and our insulin. And I think the biggest thing here is just really sitting with this and say, can we all afford to pay a certain amount to ensure that all people have access to having a healthy life? Or do we want to spend 30% of our own income to buy it private and it not cover mental health? And Medicaid currently doesn't, it's not covering the things we need it to cover. And with my schizophrenic sister, they only gave her so many days on Medicaid that she could have inpatient treatment. So she was diagnosed very young with a mental illness. Then her days are up. They give you a day amount of inpatient services. She's still sick. She's still schizophrenic, but now she can't have access to those things. And I feel like my experience dealing with it, on my own personal life level, will help me be able to talk to Republicans of how this is unfair to poor people. I think it's storytelling, and I think it's really being an example of this is a human issue. It's not Republican or Democrat. We're sick and we need help.
Yeah, my next question relates to mental illness, but first I want to give Julie an opportunity to answer. Are there any other ways? Well, first of all, yes or no, do you support Medicare? Okay. And I know you support Medicaid expansion. Do you think there's any other ways that the state can? I'm thinking, I'll just say, because Bernie Sanders, started the first bill for community health care centers, okay? These are publicly funded healthcare centers that are not part of, they're not the hospital, they're not urgent care, they're not, they're community health centers that perhaps the state could fund if they wanted to.
Yeah, so we have a number of those healthcare, community healthcare centers here in Buncombe County in this district. And yes, absolutely, we could fund those more. The thing that I love about those centers is that they tend to take a holistic approach. So they combine, it's not just physical health, but it's the physical health, it's the mental health that Taylon talked about that is so incredibly important right now. It's nutrition. They're looking at transportation. They look at people's housing. They look at all of those things and try to help people solve all of those problems. And that's where our entire healthcare system needs to go, in that direction. And the state is helping to push that with the redo of our Medicaid system, but we need more of that. Some other things we can do. The state absolutely needs to be funding, as Taylon said, much more investment in mental health. There aren't enough places for people to go. There aren't enough providers. We have to have more of that, and the state has to do that. One of the things that we did in the budget last year that would also really help is we did raise the minimum wage for certain home healthcare workers and other healthcare workers to $15 an hour. And those wages probably need to, again, be higher now, but we could guarantee, if we're not going to do it for everyone, we could at least guarantee it for people in the healthcare arena, because nursing homes, hospitals, home healthcare facilities, all of those places are desperate for workers because those people can go make more money working somewhere else. And then the final thing I will say on this is you alluded to or mentioned the privatization of mission healthcare systems, which has been, I'm guessing we universally agree on this, a disaster for our region. I will say that I think being part of HCA was beneficial to us as a community getting through COVID. Mission would have really struggled with a lot of that. And I've heard that from a number of people on the inside who work in the hospital, not HCA people, but people who work in the hospital. But in a lot of other ways, it has been a complete and total disaster. And the legislature a lot of people are angry about with Josh Stein for approving that deal. But one of the things that we can do in the legislature and should do, and I hope we will do soon, is give the Attorney General more authority in these hospital conversion deals to require more of the private entity that is acquiring the hospitals to avoid the kinds of things that we have seen here. Also, legislation imposing patient-nurse ratios would be incredibly helpful. If that had been in place or if that had been part of the deal, we would not have seen the mass exodus in the first year that we did after HCA took over. And that would have, we would be in a very different place if things like that had been in place.
Yeah, homelessness, we talked about affordable housing. Lack of affordable housing is one of the causes of homelessness. Another is mental illness. And unfortunately, that's a national problem. Reagan deinstitutionalized, there used to be state mental institutions back until the 80s, and he deinstitutionalized. And the point was that we would have community like halfway houses. But the NIMBYs really kind of prevented that. And now the jail system is the largest houser of the mentally ill. And they cycle between, going in jail and out on the streets, back in jail, out on the streets. And what you're talking about a shortage of mental health workers. That's nationwide also. That's even for people that can afford to pay a therapist, $250 an hour. I have friends who do that private therapy and they are completely swamped. They can't take on any new patients. So the mental health system is a mess. And there's also a national nurses shortage. But you guys sort of addressed what you felt that you could do on the state level. So I want to move to another cause of homelessness, which is substance abuse disorder. The Carolina Public Press just did a 3-part expose on an institution whose initials are TROISA, TROISA, and it's a treatment facility for people suffering from substance abuse disorder. Now, in this facility, the patients are put to work in a variety of jobs. They do not get paid. TROISA justifies it by saying they're getting free room and board. But what this expose found out is they're really not getting a lot of treatment. They're not seeing a psychologist or a social worker on a regular basis. And they're mostly free labor for this organization. Now, the state of North Carolina funds this entity every year. And the basis is that the organization says that 95% of its graduates do not relapse. But what they failed to say, and the article pointed out, is that only 25% of the patients graduate. So the success rate, when you factor that into it, is a lot less than 95%. So do you think that this facility should be continued to be funded? And what else do you think that the state should do to help people who are suffering from substance use disorder? And I want to ask something very bold and out there, which is, do you think that hard drugs should be legalized? Because clearly the war on drugs has not worked. There's always going to be a market as long as it's illegal. And maybe we should have, like, I can't remember which Scandinavian country it is where you can actually go and get these drugs. And it's basically supervised by the government. And that really takes the illegal market out of it, which could decrease the use. So 2-part question there. We'll start with Taylon. Do you think the state should continue to fund TROISA, being that it's operating the way it is? And 2, do you think that hard drugs should be legalized?
So yeah, this is a very personal one for me just because I have experienced mental health in a different way. And I think something that we all need to lean into more is a lot of people feel like it's not a government problem or a community problem when someone is suffering from a mental illness, and we treat this very different than somebody that has a heart problem, though it is no different in the way that these things are affecting these people. Families are who get the brunt of the harm of mentally ill people because families are the caretakers. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't have money to get treatment for our family members. And a lot of these treatment facilities do not treat people well. Absolutely not. We don't need to continue to fund mental health care that's not doing its job. That being said, when we talk about substance abuse, it is really, really hard to recover from addiction without having very important tools there. But when we become addicted to a drug, our brain chemistry actually changes. And a lot of people don't talk about the fact that addiction is genetic. Like, we have people whose genetics are more, it's easier to become addicted, and it's a brain chemistry thing, and it is very much genetic. We have to, one, humanize people with mental illnesses. This is an illness just like any others. We shouldn't just rely on family members to have to take care of people that are mentally ill, because it harms the entire family unit, which does erode our communities. As far as substance abuse, I am 100% for legalizing cannabis and mushrooms. I feel like when we look at the psychedelic effects on mental health, there is a ton of research that's showing that mushrooms can help. When we look at countries that have completely, the war on drugs have failed completely. Do I feel like we should be locking people up for possessing or using drugs? No. I think these people need help. I think these people, if we can pay to put them in prison, I think we can pay for them to be able to enter into programs that can help. Do I feel like meth should be legal? No. Do I feel like amphetamines and drugs that will cause basically the erosion of the brain and body to be legalized? No. But what I don't think we should be doing is locking people up for stumbling and ending up taking these drugs and being addicted. I don't believe we need to just jail them. I think there should be other programs in place. But if somebody is selling, pounds of drugs, of meth to people, I do feel like there has to be some sort of accountability for people that are harming our communities, because drugs are doing that. But I think we need to have more empathy for people that have stumbled into substance abuse issues, because a lot of it is coming from poverty, lack of housing, just lack of really having value in their life. And we have to take a more humanistic approach in how we treat these people.
Sandra, what is your position on substance abuse disorder?
First of all, you were asking about the organization that was actually housing mental
I forgot. Yeah, TROISA.
TROISA, yes. First, I'd like to, I applaud any organization that's taking on this particular issue. We need as many places as we can out there doing this type of work. However, we must have much more stricter requirements and things like that to make sure that they adhere to certain rules and regulations. So that definitely, I think we should keep funding them, but we should make them more or less accountable for the requirements that are necessary to make sure it's taking care of the people and giving them the services, the wraparound services they need. As far as the mental illness, we have got to start addressing it more or less from the preventive. Like, we have to start having more preventive services. A lot of the programs do not really go far enough in helping the people. And like you said, you can give them different, like here, the needle exchange. As far as I'm concerned, it's not working. Certain things that you do, you have to be sure, you have to make sure you're not enabling the use, and you actually have more preventive services. And that's what I'm a big advocate for. People have to be accountable. And I realize a lot of times that people that are on drugs or have mental issues, basically it's difficult for them. So therefore, we should have services to make sure that they're getting, the type of treatment they need for that. As far as legalizing
Hard drugs.
I would say not. And the reason I say not is because basically, you got drug dealers out here or whatever, they're just going to find another way to do it. You can start legalizing hard drugs here, but the people that are pushing all these different drugs or whatever, they're going to find other drugs to replace it. So that's the way I look at it. It's not going to stop. They have a market that they're going to have to try to adjust to and adapt to do whatever it needs to get the money. They will find a way.
Okay. Julie?
Yeah, I would echo what we've heard about this particular facility. If there are state standards that they're not meeting, then they need to be held accountable for that and not receive any more state funding until they are. If they are meeting state standards, then we probably need to look at the state standards and look at improving and strengthening them. As to the hard drug question, North Carolina is behind the 8 ball on legalizing marijuana. We are even way behind the 8 ball on legalizing medical marijuana. And I hope we can talk about that because, of course, there is a bill in the legislature that would do that right now. So I think until we figure out some of the really thorny questions on that particular substance, then I could not agree to move into legalizing hard drugs. There's a lot to figure out about legalizing marijuana. States have done it differently. We're just really learning lessons from those, and we're trying to bring those lessons into North Carolina for the medical marijuana debate that we're having right now. But I think the jury is still out on the right way, or if there is a right way to do marijuana.
Yes, well, I was going to ask a question about that medical marijuana bill because in California, we legalized medical marijuana years ago, and a few years ago, we legalized recreational marijuana. And I knew people who worked on that legislation. And one thing that's come out about that is there was supposed to be an equity piece that just isn't happening. Like so many people were locked up for sales of small amounts of marijuana. And those are the ones that should be given the opportunity to have access to the stores first, and they're not getting it. I wanted to ask Taylon this question first because you were so instrumental with hemp. And I know from experience that this Delta 8, which somehow managed to make it be legal in the state of North Carolina, to me has the same effect as marijuana. So I'm kind of wondering about the hypocrisy of that. And I wanted to ask you, Taylon, what you think of this medical marijuana bill, and what's good about it, what's bad about it, and do you ever see this a day when there's going to be recreational marijuana legal in North Carolina?
Yes, thank you for the question. And it has truly been the advocacy work that has made me see how ineffective our legislator is, especially Jimmy Dixon. So as far as medical cannabis, almost 6.5 years, I've been pushing a medical cannabis bill in the state of North Carolina. Our Republican legislators, well, I'll tell you how bad it is. They tried to ban hemp flower in 2019, which was a giant battle that I had to go down there with farmers across the state because they said it smelled too much like cannabis and the police couldn't tell a difference. And instead of trying to understand how to regulate it, they wanted to actually pull the plug on hemp flower 3 months before farmers were about to harvest all of the flower that they had been planted. This was going to destroy farmers' livelihoods, and the legislator did not care. That being said, it makes it very, very difficult for a medical bill to be put through. We currently have a bill on the table, 711, and this is a medical bill that it's disturbing. The initial bill that came forward, I was hopeful because I'm someone that while I do want legalization of cannabis and we have to quit locking people up. Someone that has Crohn's disease, I understand that the sickest people deserve access to this sooner than later. And while I want everybody to be able to partake in cannabis if they like, I think that should be their freedom. I feel like the sickest should get it first. So this bill would only cover 5 ailments. So it would be multiple sclerosis, cancer, HIV, Crohn's disease, and severe PTSD. So my first reaction to that was, it doesn't cover enough people, but that wasn't the part of the bill that is most upsetting. So there was Canadian lobbyists that came down to Raleigh and spoke with many people that were putting this bill together, and suddenly an amendment appeared in this bill. This amendment makes it where North Carolina farmers and business owners will not be able to be a part of this medical program. So that makes it, so basically the amendment in the bill says you have to have worked in a medical or a legalized state in order to be a part of this program. That's going to completely wipe out the hemp farmers here, which, mind you, the pilot program did not get expanded in our state legislature, making it where we've had to switch over to the USDA. The hemp farmers in North Carolina cannot operate under the USDA because they can't even afford the fertilizer required to be a part of this program. We have almost completely killed our hemp industry by the switchover. The legislator did nothing with this. This bill makes it where not only can farmers not operate, small business owners in North Carolina can't operate. It doesn't define CBD separate from the entire cannabis plant. That would make it where all the hemp farmers, all the CBD distributors would no longer be able to be involved in this business with this bill passing. I would like to know why Julie hasn't said anything about this bill when, I mean, close to 1,000 jobs are at stake here, and a lot of them are in Western North Carolina. What is the reasoning of not being louder about this bill?
Yeah, Julie?
Sure. So the reason I haven't been louder about this bill is because I'm not on any of the committees that are dealing with it. So it hasn't even been clear that it, the degree to which it was going to move. It does appear now that it is going to move. And I am now, once again, as with the energy bill, part of a small team of Democrats in the Senate caucus who are working together on this. The bill is incredibly problematic, as Taylon says. The requirement for vertical integration from that the same company has to, plant, harvest, process, and sell does mean, as she said, that small farmers and small businesses here in North Carolina will not be able to break into this market. There are maybe 24 companies in the entire country that would be able to do that. And I am not interested in passing a bill that would keep the 2,000 hemp farmers that we have in North Carolina and the 70 plus in Buncombe County from participating. Those have been the folks on the front lines. They have put capital in the ground, literally. They have invested in this, and they need to be able to participate in whatever market we create for medical marijuana. I will say that the number of conditions that are eligible for medical marijuana has expanded to about it's about 15 now. So that is one place where they have continued to amend the bill and expand the bill. But this vertical integration piece is hugely problematic. One of the other questions that's out there is, how is this going to be regulated? This bill sets up a totally private market. There are a lot of people who think it should be regulated the way we regulate alcohol here in North Carolina, if not through the existing ABC system, then setting up a parallel system that, again, is government regulated. And one of the justifications for that is a legislator I was talking to the other day said, I am 100% certain that my 16-year-old daughter cannot walk into an ABC store and buy booze. I am not 100% certain that she would be able, that she couldn't walk into a private CBD or medical marijuana dispensary and not be able to buy there. So there's, the government having more control over the sale makes a lot of sense to me. And then the final piece, Lauren, I would say, is the equity piece. This bill it only, this is so ridiculous. It would only make available 10 licenses across the state. Each license could have 4 dispensaries. So we're talking 40 dispensaries across 100 counties. Absolutely insane, incredibly restricted market. And none of those licenses at this point are reserved for any of the people that we've talked about who have been impacted from this negatively for the history in terms of the war on drugs. So we do need to create provisions for folks who have been impacted criminally to have access to these licenses. Again, the system that is in the bill right now is not the right system, but they need to have access to be part of this market. And then the other thing we need to look at doing is raising the not criminally prosecuting possession of small amounts of marijuana, and also expunging the criminal records of those people who have been arrested for possessing anything below that amount. This is so infuriating. Just passing a medical marijuana bill will only exacerbate the inequity of this, because who is going to have access to medical marijuana? It's going to be mostly wealthy white people, white people who have a doctor, who can get that card, who can get a doctor to prescribe them medical marijuana. So you're going to have, a wealthy person, likely a white person with a card to get medical marijuana, and you're going to have a person of color who possesses the exact same amount, not with medical marijuana, who's going to go to jail. And that is, it exacerbates the inequity, and it's unacceptable.
Taylon, we can't do follow up on this. I do want to do a separate show with you, though, because this bill is moving through the legislature, and I think this deserves a whole show. So I want to, do that. Because I want to try to do this debate within 2 hours, Sandra, if you don't have anything different to add on that topic, I'd like to start my next question about criminal justice with you. Is that okay? Okay. So the legislature just passed SB 300, which is a bipartisan bill to address some of the issues that have come out about the criminal justice system and its unequal applications and police murders since the George Floyd protests. I'd like to ask you, if you're familiar with this bill, what you like about it, where you think it fell short. And we'll start with you, Sandra. And you need to unmute.
Yes, I will say that I am not familiar with the bill. So yes.
All right, well, let's go to Julie, because Julie can tell us about the bill, and she can say what she likes and dislikes, and then you guys can have an opportunity to comment.
So this bill, criminal justice reform, is a place where the legislature made great progress last year, bipartisan progress. It's sort of like the energy bill, where there were a lot of people who thought these bills did not go far enough, and they didn't, right? They didn't. They weren't drafted by Democrats. There was bipartisan input, Democratic input, but no, they are not the bills that we would have drafted had we been in charge. So Senate Bill 300 does a number of things. Probably the most important thing that it does is it creates a duty to intervene when police officers see their colleagues using excessive force. Now, we've had that in place here in the city of Asheville for probably 5 years, but most police departments do not have that duty to intervene. And, if we had that, George Floyd would still be alive. Any number of other people would still be alive. So that is key, and that is now codified into state law. The bill also creates a couple of different registries. It creates registries for police officers who have been investigated for use of force, who have been prosecuted for use of force, who have had, a number of civilian complaints made against them. Now, one of the problems with the bill is that those databases are private. They are shared now across jurisdictions within the state, but the public is not able to see those. The theory being, if this would still serve to keep a bad officer from just jurisdiction hopping, because the police chief in the next jurisdiction can check the database and see a little bit about this officer's history. And that's a vast improvement over what we have now. But I think a lot of people would want those databases to be public, and I don't disagree with that. The other thing that this bill did, this was a last minute change that frankly, I don't know that even a lot of Democrats caught. I certainly didn't catch it. And the people I was talking to didn't catch it. It changed the body cam rules, which were already not right. So our body cam video rules were that, only family members could see the body cam video. It couldn't be released publicly. Which is very different, again, from what the city of Asheville tried to do years ago and then was prevented from doing. It now actually shifts the burden to the family members to request. They have to get a judge's order to even see the body cam video. And it's still not, you still can't release it. It's still a crime to release it. So it just makes that whole system harder. It makes that body cam video harder to see when we should be making it easier for the public to access, not more difficult. So those are some of the things in 300. Let me mention, this was in another bill, separate bill, but huge criminal justice reform, is that so North Carolina was one of the few states where 10-year-olds could enter the juvenile justice system. 10 years old. Ridiculous. We raised that age to 14. You could argue that's still ridiculous, but 14 is a heck of a lot better than 10. And we took what we could get. And when Democrats take back over, we will come back and revisit that again.
Okay, so let me rephrase my question to Sandra now that we've discussed that bill. What do you think are the 3 other perhaps major criminal justice reforms that the state could do? And you're on mute.
Okay. First of all, I would like to see them actually go back and look at some of the criminals that they are holding, and actually look at what reason they're in there, and start actually making adjustments accordingly as far as early release. I think that you have people that have been put in prison years ago for little things, and they're still sitting there. And I think that we need to go back and start reviewing those, and actually, just like I said, and making the adjustments to release a lot of people that are there that do not need to be there. And basically, because even if you talk about the drug situation, where you've got plenty of guys are just people in prison for things that people consider normal today, or it's okay today. Those type of records people should be released, and that's one thing I'd like to see. As far as the body cam situation that Julie was speaking of, I definitely think that definitely needs to be made public. It should be something that it should not be a question of who gets to see it. That's the reason it's there. So I'm definitely for pushing to change that particular rule. But like I said, the one thing I'm concerned about is going back and looking at past people that are in jail, and even expunging and releasing a lot of those people.
And Taylon, what do you think should be done? Well, let's just say on the state level, because there's a lot of things that need to be done on the federal level, but what things would you fight for on the state level in the area of criminal justice?
And I would like to touch on that bill a little bit, because I was following it, and it was good for misdemeanor cases, but I feel like Bill 300 really lacked the equitable or accountability for law enforcement. So it felt like it was more a for show bill. And something that I did like about that bill is that they focused on they made it where officers could call medics to transport people that are suffering with mental illnesses, which I think a lot of times things will escalate with people that have mental illness with police officers because one, they don't feel safe, and two, our officers are not mental health professionals and don't know how to treat people that are suffering with mental illness. So I do think that was one good thing from that bill, was the fact that they're trying to focus on how can we shift our officers out of being mental health care providers, because they're not. But I think that we want transparency. Ultimately, from our police force, we want accountability, and we can't have accountability if we don't know what our police force is doing behind closed doors. I think we must end for-profit prisons. I think for-profit prisons is the reason that we have so many people locked up, because there's a money game here. I think we must release low offense drug users from prison. I don't think that people's lives should be ruined over bad personal decisions. I think that we have to take a more human approach in how we address human issues. And so much has turned into a money game that we're not focused on how harmful it is to lock up people for being poor. This is happening all over America right now. We are criminalizing people for panhandling, for using the bathroom at doors when they have nowhere to use the bathroom. We are making it where we're arresting poor people. They get out, they can't get a job because they have a record. They can't find housing. It was hard for me to find housing, and I have no record. There's 30 people that applied for the same rental that I did, and I can't imagine having something like that on my past. We have to expunge records once people have paid their time. I think we have to be able to move forward with people when they have paid for their mistakes. And ultimately, we're not doing a very good job of putting people first, and that is going to be my first priority in Raleigh, is focusing on the issues that harm our community.
Okay, my next.
Lauren, can I mention one more thing about this bill that it did that addresses a thing that Taylon just said? I think we would all agree. It's great. Just very quick. So we have been criminalizing homelessness, and there is at least one DA candidate in running this year that wants to recriminalize homelessness. This bill said that if you are arrested for one of those kinds of offenses, for urinating in public, sleeping in a public park, being in a public park after dark, blah, 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 all of that, that if you don't reoffend, then that initial charge is, if you don't reoffend within the next 30 days, that initial charge is dropped. So it was an effort to try to, at the state level, do what a lot of local governments are not effectively doing at the local level. So just wanted to put that.
Okay, let's talk about education. I'd like to know everybody's opinion on charter schools. And when you give that opinion, are you making a distinction between profit and nonprofit charter schools, and between public and private charter schools? Sandra.
Okay. First of all, as far as charter schools, some charter schools I do feel do a great job because they're not restricted by the state as far as their curriculum. So they're able to be more creative and things like that, which is good. So it's not that I am against charter schools, but I do think that charter schools should be held to the same standards that the public schools are, to some degree, to be able to, get funding. Public schools, let me see, how did you say that? So yeah, that's
there's for-profit charters and there's nonprofit charters. Yes. And then even within public charters, you could say they're public because they get public funding, but they're privately run.
Yes. Well, the privately run, like I said, they still need to maintain the same standards or have the same standards that any school, but they should provide the best services and to the children that, pretty much that all the others. And I think that they should have oversight. They should, as far as the funding now, what happens with this, Lauren, is unfortunately a lot of the schools are not funded, equally. So that is a concern of mine. I think that private schools should not have the same funding as the public schools.
Right. Well, those people that are against private schools, it's the same thing. If the charter school is privately run and they don't have to answer to a public entity, they're getting public funds, and all they're doing is defunding public education, because the way the funding goes, it follows the child. So if the child leaves the public school system, goes to a charter school, there goes the money.
Yes.
And, you know, in Los Angeles, the school district loses $500 million a year to charter schools, and only 20% of the kids are in charters. If this billionaire who supported charter schools very heavily with his money and recently passed away had his way, and 50% of the kids ended up in charters in LA, the public school system would have gone bankrupt. So that's why I'm asking about that. You know, a lot of people make a distinction. They say, oh, it's a public school. They're only public in the sense they get public money. Taylon?
Yeah, I'm against the voucher system. I'm against us using public funds to fund private schools. I think right now, one of the top issues for me in North Carolina is the attack on our public school education. I think it's happening across the country, and it is such a class war. It is, what is happening is only people that have money are able to send their kids to schools that are actually, I mean, charter schools are teaching our kids a lot of things that they need. And it's unfortunate that our public schools right now are losing teachers at such a high rate that we can't, I mean, we're moving teachers between classes, between grades. We aren't keeping our supportive staff because we're refusing to pay them enough money. And the state legislator's like, well, there's no funding for this. We just shut down our public Montessori school. This school was one of the few ones in our community that was focused on teaching our children uniquely. Kids learn differently. I think we need to readdress public education from top to bottom, because it has turned into such a testing. Everything's tested. But we as humans are not all the same. We do not learn the same, but we aren't giving our children the tools that they need to become successful adults. And I think when our teachers aren't happy, and I think that transmutes to our children. And Asheville City Schools, I just did a walkout with ACAE demanding that they get paid more. $7.71 is what it costs per hour for us to live in Buncombe County. If our teachers should be one of the highest paid professions in the entire country. They are doing the Lord's work. And I think that we have to start funding them. And I think that us allocating money to charter schools is just, it's harming our public schools, and we must stop.
Julie?
Yeah, so totally agree. No public money to private schools through vouchers. I also, so charter schools is a harder question for me. I think we have too many of them. I think in the Republicans' war on public education, they have increased that cap to the point that we are resegregating our education system, and I think that is unacceptable. I do, however, think that charter schools are appropriate to address children who are struggling in the traditional system. And that can be, here in Asheville, we have Peak Academy, which is not exclusively focused on children of color, but is a new strategy in trying to close that opportunity gap. And, that's a charter school I can support. They're trying something new, and we have to try something new. You mentioned closing the Montessori school, and there's a group of parents that is trying to get a charter Montessori school here. And, again, that I haven't looked at the proposal yet, but that is an effort that I also might be able to get behind, because again, it is taking a unique approach to education, for kids that, again, might not do well in the traditional system. So yeah, we need much more public education. And I just also want to say, because it just happened this morning, happy to say that I just secured the endorsement of the North Carolina Association of Educators, which, to the degree that we have a teachers union here in North Carolina, is that organization. So I'm a proud advocate for our public schools.
Yeah, I want to let you guys know that there is an alternative to do exactly what you all seem to like about charters, which is an innovative curriculum and innovative teaching methods. And in Los Angeles, they're called pilot schools. and teachers and the administrator can get together and put forward a proposal for a pilot school. And it's still a public school. They have to hire unionized teachers, which is the case in Los Angeles. They have to adhere to the state standards. They have to be accountable to an elected school body. All of these things the charter schools don't have to do. So there is a way to get what you're looking for without having to defund public education to charters. The final, I know we've gone over the 2 hours, but I promised you guys each an opportunity to ask one question of your opponent. You don't necessarily have to take advantage of that, but I did promise it to you. So let's start with you, Taylon. Who would you like to ask? Well, you can ask one of each or maybe just one. And you're on mute.
Yes, so I have one for Julie, and it is surrounding the vote for the Flatiron Hotel building. You have spoke a lot about the change that you brought at Asheville City Council, and I do feel like our community felt a little abandoned by you when you had flipped your vote on turning the Flatiron building into a hotel when we had 70 businesses, local businesses that were paying pretty affordable rent there. And why should our community trust you to keep us from gentrifying and growing too rapidly when that vote was changed so quickly while the community pushed back against the Flatiron turning into a hotel?
Sure.
Hard-hitting question.
I'm happy to answer it. Of course, in my current job, I don't deal with those decisions, but happy to address it. So it was, this was not, it's not like I just woke up on the day that council met and decided to change my vote. So I don't remember how many weeks there were between the two votes, maybe a month. In that time, I did several things. I spoke to a number of the business owners who are in that building, and heard from a number of them, not all of them, but a number of them, something along the lines of, this building is a disaster. They can't even rent the 7th floor. And it needs somebody needs to own it who's going to take care of it, because it's a functional building, but it's not in good shape. And people were happy to move out. Those people I spoke with were happy to move out. So that was one piece. So there was not universal opposition within the tenants of that building. The second thing I did was I went to the people who were pushing for another option, and I got the people who were proposing to turn it into a hotel and their lawyers. I convinced them to sit down with the proponents of something else. And I think there were at least 2 meetings. And I said to the people who were proposing something else, this is your chance. This is your chance to challenge their numbers. This is your chance to put another option on the table. This is your chance to make your pitch a real business-based pitch for how that building could be done differently. And y'all just hash it out, figure it out. Because of course, what the hotel folks were saying was, nothing else pencils. An office building doesn't pencil. You can't fix the building, bring it up to code, do what you need to do, and have it be an office building. It won't work. And so I challenged the people who were saying that it would work to go into that discussion and show them, and then therefore show me and other council members that it would work. And they were not able to do that. There was not another viable proposal that got put on the table. The third thing is that I did convince the developers to dedicate not just 1, but 2 floors to office. So they had come to the table with a proposal for 1 floor, and I, essentially as a condition, after these other things for my support, I said, we need more office. You have to give it more office, and they gave it a second. They gave it a second floor, and having sort of put out, what I needed them to do in order to get my support, and them having done that, at that point, it was a principled decision that I could not move the goalposts. I had told them what they needed to do, and they did it. And I, at that point, felt like I had to support it. It was the single most difficult decision in my time on city council. Absolutely.
Okay. Sandra, do you have a question for either of your opponents? On mute.
Okay, I have a question for you. Okay, Julie, within your first year as a junior senator, you were absent 92 votes in the last legislative session. And you stated during many speeches that you brought back $9 million to Western North Carolina. But what you failed to mention is the bulk of it went to Mountain True, an organization that you co-founded. You are presently the sole sponsor of State Senate Bill 179 to increase the sales tax and use tax 1/4% for Asheville residents only, at a time when people are struggling to get back on their feet. You're also one of the sponsors of House Bill 951, which is a great step forward. However, it failed to address the tremendous financial impact of the mid to low income families. And I'm just curious, what can the good people of Western North Carolina expect from you moving forward?
So let me address a couple of those things. So the absences, just so everyone understands, that's not days, those are votes. And we, on any given day, we can take 5 votes, we can take 20 votes, we can take more, we can take less. I have, and I'm happy to provide it to anyone who wants it. I have gone back and looked at each one of those days, and each one of those days was an excused and justifiable absence. What unfortunately happened is that on a couple of those days, those were days where we took like 16 votes. And there's just nothing that you can do about that. I was sick, I was taking care of my mother, I was out of town, all things that happen in the normal course of life. The sales tax bill that you referred to would have, and this is a bill that myself and other transit advocates in the city of Asheville have been wanting to see for years. And finally, I got there, and so I did it. This would have been a 1/4-cent sales tax that would have gone to fund our transit system so that we could stop funding expansion of our transit system out of our general fund. We are never going to have enough money in our general fund to fund the transit system that we need. We all talked about that earlier today, how we need a transit system that better serves the people of Asheville. We are never going to fund it out of the general fund. It has to have a dedicated source of funding. And so that's what that 1/4-cent sales tax was designed to do. I can't remember what I think I've talked about.
Of the $9 million, most of it went to Mountain True.
Thank you. So the $9 million did not go to Mountain True. Absolutely not. There was not $1 in this budget that went to Mountain True. Mountain True has gotten state allocations in the past, but not in this budget, not as long as I am in the legislature. That will not happen because that is a direct conflict of interest. Interestingly, the legislature doesn't think it's a conflict of interest, but I do. What that $9 million was for conservation projects in Western North Carolina, but every single of those dollars went to a governmental entity. I think actually they all went to governmental entities, maybe a couple to other nonprofits. And let me just be clear about this. Mountain True we have had a contract lobbyist working for us at the legislature for probably 5 or 6 years. We are the only environmental group in Western North Carolina that is active at the General Assembly that way. And we have actually brought far more than $9 million to Western North Carolina because of our advocacy at the General Assembly for projects. But the vast majority, I think only 120,000 of the probably $15 million or more that we have brought to Western North Carolina has gone to Mountain True. And as I said, as long as I am there, not a single penny will come to Mountain True.
Okay. Julie, do you have a question for either of your challengers?
I do. I have questions for both, but I hear you saying that I can ask only one.
No, I got the impression they didn't have questions for each other. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I have a question for each. So, all right. So I will start with Taylon. Taylon, you are supported by 2 organizations that think compromise is a terrible word and incrementalism is unacceptable. And there's language on your website that gets to that effect as well. Republicans troll the North Carolina House and Senate by solid margins, and that is not predicted to change in the next election. Given that reality, how do you propose to make progress and achieve your goals?
Thank you for that question. I think one of the biggest things that I bring to the legislator is my ability to connect with people through the art of storytelling. I think a lot of people that have disconnect on a lot of these issues is because they have never created relationships with people that are struggling directly with the issues that they are voting on. And I do feel like, coming from Republican parents, a Republican family, I do have the ability to connect with people with my tenacity, one, but also with my sense of humor, as far as not wanting to negotiate across the aisle when it comes to the collateral being the people of Buncombe County. Like, no, I think we need more people in our legislature calling out the legislators that are doing damage to their voters and to their constituents. And I think AOC is a prime example of, you can be in opposition and still get things done if you can enact your community. When we won against the hemp flower ban, it wasn't because I went down there and yelled at the legislators. It's because I showed up with 300 hemp farmers that were humans. They were able to look their legislators in the eye and say, oh, this vote is going to potentially cause me to not be able to keep my seat. And I think that is what I do. I bring the community together, and I will keep the community engaged in what's going on in Raleigh so they can also show up and be a part of the political process. I don't want to just lead. I want to work with the community to get things done. And I think, I've saved almost 1,700 hemp jobs from being taken away. And that's a ton of jobs to have saved without being in the legislature. And that was with the Republican committees that I was working with. So I think that I can get things done without compromising, harming our community.
Okay.
Julie, you have a question for Sandra.
I do. Sandra, you say that you are running, I've heard you say several times that you're running to represent all people, not just special interests. The implication there is that I represent only special interests. Last year, I sponsored legislation to protect and defend the interests of environmentalists, the LGBTQ plus community, women, people of color, the Latinx community, workers, transit riders, teachers and students, and longtime homeowners concerned about displacement, among others. So I'm curious, what interests would you represent that are different from those that I represent?
First of all, thank you for that question, Julie. I represent a section of the people that our voices aren't heard. And when I say that, is basically, I think that a lot of times, basically, it's like when I was talking about special interest groups that you basically adhere to, promote or whatever, are things that actually do not actually help a lot of the common people in the Western North Carolina area. I think that enough is not done to address the needs of the people that truly need, and the people's voices that are never heard. I think that what has happened here, a lot of things that you promote, which are good. I'm pro-climate control, I'm pro-environment, all of those things, but more so, I'm pro the people. The people here, a lot of people here are hurting. They're struggling. They're struggling to stay in their homes. They're struggling to even feed their children. And those are the issues that I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the pocketbook issues that people need. And like I said, all the other issues are important, but I think people are more important.
Okay. Well, that was a great 2.25 hours, you guys. I want to thank you for sticking with it. I want to thank the viewers for sticking with it. I know I promised you closing statements, but unless you feel you have anything different to add than what you said in your opening statements, in the interest of time and wanting to have people share and watch this debate, I'd rather just ask you to close by saying how viewers can volunteer for and contribute to your campaigns if they so choose? And we start with you, Julie.
Sure. My website is mayfieldforncsenate.com, and you can sign up there to volunteer, to host a yard sign. We're canvassing and calling, and of course, you can also make a donation there as well. Thank you.
Taylon?
So you can find me on taylonbreedon.com. That's TaylonBreeden.com. We are canvassing this Friday from 5 to 8 p.m., meeting at the Pot Stirred. And then Saturday, we're going to be canvassing in the afternoon as well. Come join us. We are a working class campaign, and yeah, we need all the help we can get.
Sandra?
Hi, yes, please go to kilgorenccsenate.org. There you can get more information about my campaign, and you can volunteer, donate, or whatever, get yard signs or whatever you need. Also, please feel free, I'll just give you my cell number, which is 954-540-5593. You can reach me at any time. And also my email, which is sandkilgore@gmail.com. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Yes, and I'd like to ask all of you when we end the show to put that contact information into the comments, and also to please share this show, guests and viewers, because I, like I said, moved here a year and a quarter ago and don't have a big audience here, but I think this was a really, really valuable forum, and I hope you agree too.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Lauren. And again, I apologize for my for the delay and the stickiness with which I finally got here.
Well, we're just glad that you were able to make it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you
And
very much.
my next interview is going to be with Nina Tovich, candidate for City Council. That interview is tomorrow at 7. On Monday, I'm interviewing Allison Scott at 8. And then I'm interviewing Will Hornaday next Thursday at 8 also. So there'll be more, but that's what I've got lined up for right now. So thank you very much and good night.
Good night.